The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and leather briefing folders. Vice Admiral Marcus Cale hadn't wanted to be there. Some Veterans Healthcare Symposium in San Diego, the kind of obligatory appearance that cluttered his calendar between actual operations. He sat in the back row, dress whites crisp, ribbons stacked like a color guard on his chest, scrolling through mission briefs on his phone. The speaker at the podium was talking about PTSD intervention models, her voice steady but unremarkable. He glanced up once. She was younger than he expected, maybe early 30s, dark hair pulled into a practical bun, wearing scrubs under a blazer like she'd come straight from a shift. A nurse. He returned to his phone. Then she said something that made his thumb freeze mid-scroll. The hardest part isn't the blood or the screaming. It's the silence after. When you realize the medevac isn't coming fast enough, and you're holding someone's hand while they ask you to tell their family something you know you'll never be able to say right. The room went quiet. Cale looked up again. She wasn't reading from notes. Her hands rested on the podium, steady, and around her neck hung a thin silver chain. Something small glinted there, catching the overhead lights. The presentation ended with polite applause. Cale stood as attendees filtered toward the coffee station. He moved through the crowd with the purposeful drift of someone used to command and found himself beside her as she gathered her notes. "That was good," he said, voice low enough not to sound patronizing. She looked up, sized him up in half a second, the trident on his chest, the stars on his collar, and gave a small, professional smile. "Thank you, Admiral. You served." It wasn't really a question. She hesitated just a beat. "Long time ago." Her hand moved unconsciously to the necklace, fingers brushing the small pendant there. From this close, he could see it wasn't just a pendant. It was a locket, old and worn, but there was something else, a shape beneath it, metallic, rectangular. His eyes narrowed slightly, the kind of focus that came from years of reading situations in fractions of seconds. "What's that?" he asked, nodding toward it. She followed his gaze, then her expression shifted. Something guarded slid into place. "Just a keepsake." But Cale had seen too many dog tags in his career to mistake the outline of one, even tucked inside a locket. He recognized the weight people carried them with. The way she held herself, the economy of movement, the way she'd talked about silence and medevacs. It wasn't observation. It was memory. "Mind if I ask whose it is?" Her jaw tightened. For a moment, he thought she might walk away. Instead, she reached up and carefully opened the locket. Inside, pressed against a faded photo, was a dog tag, scratched, blood-stained, and the name stamped into the metal made his breath catch. The room seemed to tilt. He knew that name. Every SEAL on the West Coast knew that name. "Where did you get this?" His voice came out harder than he intended. She met his eyes, unflinching. "I was there when he died." The words hung in the air like smoke. Cale's mind raced backward, pulling up mission files, after-action reports, classified summaries he'd read years ago. Operation Winter Shroud. The helicopter that went down in the Hindu Kush. 4 SEALs lost. 1 pilot. The pilot's name had been redacted in most reports, listed only as KIA with honors. But the circumstances, controversial, incomplete, the subject of a closed-door investigation that never went public. He looked at her again, really looked. The way she stood. The calluses on her hands, the faint scar along her jawline barely visible under makeup. "You're not a nurse," he said slowly. She gave a bitter smile. "I am now." He felt something cold settle in his chest. "You flew that bird." She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The dog tag said everything. The room around them blurred into irrelevance, people chatting, pouring coffee, shaking hands. Cale's focus narrowed to the woman in front of him, to the weight of what she was holding, to the questions that suddenly flooded his mind like seawater into a breached hull. "I need to know what happened that night," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, you don't. 4 of my men died on that mountain." 5, she corrected, voice hard. 5 people died. Everyone forgets the pilot." Her hand closed around the locket, and for the first time he saw the tremor in her fingers. "I didn't forget," Cale said. "I just never got the full story." She studied him for a long moment, weighing something internal. Then she glanced around the room, lowered her voice. "Not here." He pulled a card from his pocket, handed it to her. "My office tomorrow, 0900. She looked at the card, then at him. "Why?" Because that mission was never closed, and if you were there, you're the only person who knows the truth. She arrived at 08:55 wearing jeans and a jacket, no longer the polished speaker from the symposium. Cale's aide escorted her into his office, sparse, functional, walls lined with unit photos and framed commendations. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. She sat posture straight, hands folded in her lap. He didn't waste time. Your name wasn't in the report, not the unredacted ones I've seen. Why? She stared at him, something unreadable in her eyes. Because officially I was never there. Cale leaned back. Start from the beginning. She took a breath, slow and measured, like she was stepping into cold water. My call sign was Revenant. I flew MH-60s out of Bagram, mainly medevac runs and infill support. Winter Shroud was supposed to be a simple extract. Get your team off a ridgeline after they tagged an HVT compound. Weather was turning, but nothing we hadn't handled before. Her voice was steady, clinical, but her fingers tightened slightly around the armrest. We came in at 2200, winds gusting 40 knots, snow cutting visibility to near zero. Your team was lit up. Taliban had tracked them, reinforcements moving in fast. I put the bird down on a slope, rotors maybe 10 feet from the rocks. They loaded in, all except, she stopped, swallowed. Except Lieutenant Carver. He stayed on the ridge, covering the extract. Said he'd wait for the second bird. Cale's jaw tight. He remembered Carver, 28 years old, best breacher he'd ever seen. There was no second bird, Cale said quietly. Sandstorm rolled in, everything grounded. I know, her voice dropped. I told him to get on, ordered him. He refused, said if we waited, none of us would make it off that mountain, so I lifted. She looked down at her hands. We were 30 seconds out when the ridge lit up, RPGs, heavy fire. Carver went down. I heard it on the radio. He was still calling for extract, still fighting, and I was already gone. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Cale didn't move. I turned the bird around, she continued. My co-pilot, Hayes, told me we'd never make it. Fuel was critical, weather collapsing, enemy reinforcements closing in. I didn't care. Carver was alone on that mountain because I left him. She met Cale's eyes, and he saw it then. The thing that lived behind her composure, the weight that had carved lines into her face that shouldn't have been there at 33. Guilt, the kind that never faded. I flew back into the storm, she said. Visual was gone. I was flying on instruments and memory, rotors screaming, birds shaking like it was going to come apart. Hayes kept yelling at me to abort. I told him to shut up and find me a landing zone. Cale leaned forward slightly. You went back. I found the ridge, barely. Came in so hard I cracked the landing gear. Carver was still there, still shooting, bleeding out from a leg wound. I put down in a hailstorm of gunfire and Hayes jumped out to pull him in. That's when we got hit. Her voice stayed even, but something flickered across her face, a shadow brief and deep. RPG struck the tail rotor. The bird lurched, started spinning. I fought it, tried to stabilize, but we were going down. I got us over the valley, away from the ridge, and auto-rotated into a crash landing. We hit hard, broke apart. Hayes was killed instantly, debris through the cockpit. Carver was unconscious, trapped in the wreckage. And I? She touched her ribs unconsciously, a gesture so subtle Cale almost missed it. I pulled him out, carried him 100 meters into the rocks and waited for sunrise because nothing was flying in that storm. I kept him alive for 6 hours with a field kit and pressure bandages, talking to him, keeping him conscious. He kept asking for his wife, kept saying her name, Jessica, over and over. Cale felt his chest tight. He'd been at Carver's funeral. He'd handed Jessica the flag. He died just before dawn, she said quietly. I was holding his hand. He gave me his dog tag and made me promise I'd tell Jessica he loved her, that he wasn't scared, and then he was gone. She stopped, staring at nothing. SAR found me at 07:30. They pulled me out, debriefed me, and then I was told the story would be different, that the mission had failed due to weather and enemy action, that my decision to return was deemed reckless and outside operational parameters. Cale's hands curled into fists on the desk. They buried it. They buried me, she corrected. Gave me a medical discharge, a quiet ceremony, and a folder full of NDAs. No medal, no recognition, just a polite suggestion that I move on with my life and never talk about what happened. Her voice didn't rise, but the bitterness was there, sharp as a blade. So I became a nurse. Figured if I couldn't fly people out of hell, I could at least help them when they got home. Cale sat back, processing. You saved Carver's life for 6 hours in hostile territory under fire after your bird went down, and they discharged you for it. They said I endangered the crew by returning, that Hayes's death was on me. She looked at him, and for the first time her voice cracked slightly. They weren't wrong. Bullshit. The word came out harder than he intended. Hayes knew what he signed up for. So did Carver. You gave him 6 more hours. You brought him home. I brought home a body, she said flatly. That's not the same. Cale stood, paced to the window, stared out at the harbor where gray ships floated like toys in the distance. He'd read the official report: pilot error, mechanical failure, unfortunate loss of life. It was a sanitized lie. Why didn't you fight it? He asked. She laughed, a short, hollow sound. With what? I was a warrant officer. They had lawyers, classifications, and a narrative that kept everyone comfortable. Fighting would have meant dragging Hayes's family through it, Carver's widow, the whole team, so I signed the papers and disappeared. Cale turned to face her. What's your real name? She hesitated. Matties, CW2 Kara Matties. He repeated it silently, committing it to memory. Revenant, she nodded, because I kept coming back even when I shouldn't have. He moved back to the desk, sat down, and pulled a file from his drawer. He slid it across to her. She opened it slowly. Inside were personnel records, mission logs, incident reports, all stamped classified. Her eyes widened. How did you? I pulled every file I could find on Winter Shroud last night, Cale said. Took some favors. There's enough here to reopen the investigation. Kara stared at the file, then closed it carefully. Why would you do that? Because the men I lost that night deserved better than a cover-up, and so did you. She shook her head. It won't change anything. Hayes is still dead. Carver's still dead. I still made the call that got them killed. You made the call that gave Carver a chance, Cale said firmly. And Hayes made his own choice to go back out there. You don't get to carry all of that. She looked at him, eyes red-rimmed but dry. You didn't see his face, Admiral. You didn't hear him calling for his wife while he bled out in my arms. I did, and that doesn't go away just because you reopen a file. Cale met her gaze. No, it doesn't, but maybe it's time people knew what really happened. Maybe it's time his family knew he didn't die alone on a ridge, that someone went back for him. Kara was silent for a long moment, fingers tracing the edge of the file. What do you want from me? The truth, on record. A full debrief, unredacted. And then what? Then I take it to NAVSBECWAR command and make sure this gets reviewed properly. I can't promise you a medal or an apology, but I can promise you won't be erased anymore. She looked down at the dog tag around her neck, visible now outside her shirt. The metal caught the light, dull and worn from years of being held. Carver made me promise I'd tell his wife the truth. I never did. I didn't think I had the right. You have it now, Cale said. She exhaled slowly, then nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Cale opened his laptop. Start from the beginning, everything. And so she did. For the next 3 hours, Kara Matties told the story of Winter Shroud in full, every decision, every radio call, every moment of terror and blood and impossible choice. Cale recorded it all, asked questions, cross-referenced with the files. By the time they finished, the sun had moved across the sky, casting long shadows through the office windows. When she finally stopped talking, her voice was hoarse. Cale saved the file, backed it up twice. Thank you, he said quietly. She stood, exhausted. What happens now? Cale walked her to the door. Now I do my job and you go see Jessica Carver. Kara froze. I can't. You can, he said. You owe it to him and to yourself. She looked at him, fear and hope tangled in her expression. Then she nodded once, turned, and walked out. Cale watched her go, then returned to his desk. He opened the mission file again, stared at the redacted lines, the bureaucratic language that had buried a woman's courage and a pilot's sacrifice. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Cale, this is a surprise. General, I need to talk to you about a mission from 6 years ago, Winter Shroud, and I need you to listen very carefully. There was a pause. That's closed. It shouldn't be. Another pause, longer this time, then, come to DC, bring everything you have. Cale smiled grimly. Already booked the flight. He hung up, looked at the photo on his desk, his team, years ago, young and sharp and alive. Some of those faces were gone now, but their stories didn't have to be. He pulled up Kara's contact info, sent a single text. "Thank you for your service, Revenant. It's time we made sure everyone knows." 3 days later, Kara stood on a quiet street in Virginia, staring at a blue house with white shutters. A child's bike lay in the yard. She'd driven past twice already, nearly turned around both times. But Carver's dog tag rested cold against her chest, and his voice still echoed in her memory. "Jessica, tell Jessica." She walked up the path and knocked. The door opened. The woman who answered was older than the photo Kara remembered, tired lines around her eyes but still recognizable. "Can I help you?" Kara's throat tightened. "Mrs. Carver, my name is Kara Matties. I served with your husband." Jessica's expression shifted, something cautious and painful moving behind her eyes. "You were there." "I was his pilot." The words came out rough. "I was with him when he died." Jessica's hand went to her mouth. "Come in, please." They sat in a small living room, photos of Carver everywhere, wedding pictures, deployment photos, a portrait in dress blues. Kara told her everything. The mission, the decision to go back, the crash. The 6 hours in the rocks holding his hand, listening to him say Jessica's name. She didn't spare herself, didn't soften the edges. When she finished, Jessica was crying silently. "He wasn't alone," she whispered. "No," Kara said, voice breaking. "He wasn't alone." Jessica reached across the coffee table and took Kara's hand. "Thank you for going back, for staying with him, for," her voice broke, "for being there." Kara couldn't speak. She just held the woman's hand and let the tears come, the one she'd held back for 6 years. They sat like that for a long time, two women bound by the ghost of a man who died on a mountain half a world away. When Kara finally left, the weight on her chest felt different. Not gone, never gone, but shared. Lighter. Drove back to San Diego as the sun set, the sky burning orange and red like distant fires. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kale, hearing scheduled, 2 weeks. "You'll be called to testify. Are you ready?" She stared at the words, then typed back, "Yes." 2 weeks later, Kara sat in a Pentagon conference room across from a panel of officers, admirals, generals, JAG representatives. Kale sat to her left, silent and solid. She told the story again. This time it was recorded, official. Unredacted, they asked hard questions. She gave hard answers. When it was over, the senior admiral, a man with gray hair and 3 stars, looked at her for a long moment. "Chief Warrant Officer Matties, what you did that night was either the bravest or most reckless thing I've ever heard. I'm still not sure which." Kara met his eyes. "It was both, sir." The admiral's expression softened slightly. "Noted. This panel will review all evidence and issue findings within 30 days. You're dismissed." She stood, saluted, and walked out. Kale followed her into the hallway. "You did good in there," she exhaled shakily. "Doesn't feel like it." "It never does," he said. "But you told the truth, that's what matters." She looked at him. "Thank you for this, for everything." Kale nodded. "Carver would have done the same for you." She smiled, small and sad. "Yeah, he would have." 28 days later, the findings came. Kara was alone in her apartment when the email arrived. She opened it with trembling hands. The investigation into Operation Winter Shroud had been reopened. Her actions were deemed tactically sound under extreme circumstances. The previous determination of pilot error was rescinded. CW2 Kara Matties was posthumously, no, retroactively, awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary heroism in aerial flight. The medical discharge was overturned, full honors restored. She read it 3 times, then set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. It didn't bring Hayes back, didn't bring Carver back, but it meant they hadn't been erased, meant the truth was finally on record. Her phone rang. "Kale, you see it?" "Yeah." Her voice was thick. "Congratulations, Revenant." She laughed, a wet, broken sound. "Thanks." "There's one more thing," Kale said. "Jessica Carver wants to see you. She's at the ceremony." "What ceremony?" "You'll see, be at Coronado Naval Base Friday 0900, dress uniform." "I don't have." "You will. I'm sending someone to get your measurements. Just be there." He hung up before she could argue. Friday morning, Kara stood in a borrowed dress uniform, ribbons she hadn't earned officially now pinned above her heart. The ceremony was small, just a few dozen people. Jessica Carver was there, holding her daughter's hand, Hayes's parents. Some of the SEALs from the original mission, older now, grayer, and Kale, standing at a podium in front of a memorial wall where new names had been added. CW2HAYES. LT Carver, CW2MATTIS. Revenant. Cale spoke about courage, about sacrifice, about the people who flew into the storm when everyone else turned away. Kara barely heard it. She was staring at the wall at her call sign etched in stone and realized for the first time in 6 years that maybe she wasn't a ghost. Maybe she'd been a revenant all along, coming back, surviving, carrying the weight so others wouldn't have to. When the ceremony ended, people approached her, shook her hand, thanked her. Jessica hugged her tight and whispered, "He'd be proud of you." Kara returned to her work at the hospital, but something had shifted. The weight was still there, it always would be. But now it felt like armor instead of chains. She wore Carver's dog tag every day, a reminder, not of failure but of choice. 6 months later, she got a call from Cale. "I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. We're starting a new program training pilots for high-risk medevac in combat zones. I want you to run it." She was silent. "I'm not active duty anymore." "You could be if you wanted." She thought about it, about the sky, about the sound of rotors and the weight of lives in her hands. "I'll think about it," she said. "Don't think too long," Cale replied. "We need people who know what it means to go back," she smiled. "I'll call you tomorrow." That night, Kara stood on her balcony looking up at the stars. The sky was clear, infinite, full of silent promise. She touched the dog tag around her neck, thought about Carver, about Hayes, about all the people she'd carried, all the ones she couldn't. And for the first time in years, she felt ready to fly again. The next morning, she called Cale. "I'm in." "Good," he said. "Welcome back, Revenant." She reported to Coronado 3 weeks later. The program was small, just a handful of pilots, all veterans, all carrying their own ghosts. She stood in front of them, no notes, no rehearsal. "My name is Kara Matties, call sign Revenant. I'm here because I know what it's like to make the hard call, to go back when everyone tells you to leave, to carry the weight of the people you couldn't save." She paused, met their eyes. "This program isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and flying anyway. It's about understanding that every time you take that bird up, you're choosing to put yourself between someone and death. And sometimes you won't be fast enough. Sometimes you'll lose them, but you'll go back. Every single time. Because that's what we do." The room was silent. Then one of the pilots, a young warrant officer with a scar across his jaw, raised his hand. "What if we're not strong enough?" Kara smiled, sad and knowing. "You won't be. None of us are, but you'll do it anyway." Over the next year, Kara trained pilots who would go on to save hundreds of lives. She taught them how to read the wind, how to land on a dime, how to stay calm when the world was on fire. And she taught them the thing no manual could, how to live with the ones they couldn't save. Cale visited sometimes, checked on the program, watched from the sidelines. One evening, after a long training flight, he found her sitting alone on the tarmac, staring at the helicopters lined up like sleeping birds. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Yeah," she said, "just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange it is, that the worst night of my life ended up meaning something." Cale nodded. "That's the thing about tragedy, it doesn't erase itself, but sometimes if you're strong enough, you can turn it into something that matters." She looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I have to," he said. "Otherwise, what's the point?" They sat in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. "Carver would have liked this," Kara said quietly. "He would have been proud." "He is," Cale said. "Wherever he is, he's proud." Kara touched the dog tag. "I hope so." 2 years later, the program had expanded. Revenant training, named after her call sign, had become the gold standard for combat medevac pilots. Kara was promoted, given command of an entire wing. She still flew. Still felt the old fear every time she lifted off. But she also felt something else now, purpose. One afternoon she received a letter, no return address, just a single page handwritten. "Chief Matties, you don't know me, but you saved my son. He was wounded in Kandahar last year, pinned down under fire. The pilot who extracted him trained under you. She told me she learned from the best, from someone who taught her that going back isn't reckless. It's love. Thank you for teaching her. Thank you for giving me my son back. Semper Fi." Kara read it twice, then pinned it to her office wall beside a photo of her first training class. She stood there for a long time, staring at the faces, at the letter, at the small wooden plaque beneath them that read, For those who fly into the storm. Years passed. Kara's hair started to gray at the temples. She trained hundreds of pilots, watched them deploy, welcomed them home. Some didn't come back. She attended their funerals, held their families, and carried their names the way she carried Carver's. The weight never got lighter, but she got stronger. One spring morning, she was called to Cale's office. He'd been promoted, 4 stars now, silver hair, lines carved deep into his face. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair. She sat. He slid a folder across the desk. "You're being considered for a new position, Chief of Aeromedical Operations SOCOM. You'd oversee all medevac training across every branch." She stared at the folder. "That's a big job. You're the only person qualified." She opened the folder, scanned the details. It would mean less flying, more oversight, more politics. But it would also mean shaping the future of combat rescue for the entire military. "Can I think about it?" "Take your time," Cale said. "But Kara, you've already changed the way we do this. This is just making it official." She nodded slowly. "I'll let you know." That night she drove to the cemetery where Carver was buried. She hadn't been in years, hadn't needed to, but tonight felt different. She stood at his grave, reading the headstone. Lt. James Carver, beloved husband and father, died serving his country. She knelt, placed her hand on the cold stone. "Hey, Carver, it's me, Revenant." Wind moved through the trees, soft and steady. "I got offered a job, big one, the kind you'd probably tell me I'm crazy to turn down," she smiled. "But I'm scared I'll mess it up, scared I'm not good enough." She paused, listening to the silence. "You believed in me, though. That last night when I came back, you didn't question it, you just trusted me." She took a breath. "So I'm going to trust myself, for you, for Hayes, for everyone who's counting on people like me to do the right thing." She stood, touched the dog tag one last time. "Rest easy, Lieutenant. I've got it from here." She walked back to her car, feeling lighter than she had in years. 3 weeks later, Kara accepted the position. She moved to Tampa, set up her new office, and dove into the work. It was brutal, endless meetings, policy reviews, funding battles. But slowly, carefully, she began to reshape the system. Standardized training protocols, better equipment, mental health support for pilots, everything she wished had existed when she was flying. 1 year into the job, she was invited to speak at the Naval Academy. She stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of young faces, and remembered being one of them once, idealistic, hungry, certain she could change the world. "You're going to face impossible choices," she told them. "Moments where every option is bad and you have to pick one anyway. When that happens, don't ask yourself what's easy, ask yourself what's right. And then do it even if it costs you everything." A midshipman raised her hand. "How do you live with it when you make the wrong choice?" Kara met her eyes. "You don't, not really, but you keep going. You honor the people you lost by becoming someone they'd be proud of, and you make sure their sacrifice means something." The room was silent. After the speech, the midshipman approached her. "Ma'am, I just want to say I want to be a pilot because of you, because of what you did." Kara felt her throat tight. "Then be better than me, learn from my mistakes, and when the time comes, don't hesitate." The midshipman saluted. Kara returned it, watched her walk away, and thought, maybe that's what legacy really is. Not the medals or the titles, but the people you inspire to be brave. 5 years into her tenure, Kara retired. Not because she had to, but because she'd done what she set out to do. The system was stronger. The pilots were better trained. The culture had shifted. She moved to a small house near the ocean, adopted a dog, and learned to sleep without nightmares. Cale visited once, bringing whiskey and stories. They sat on her porch watching the waves. "You did good," he said. "We did good," she corrected. He smiled. "Fair enough." They drank in silence, honoring the ghosts they carried. "Do you ever regret it?" Cale asked. Going back that night, she thought about it. "No, I regret that it wasn't enough, but I don't regret trying." Years later, on the anniversary of Winter Shroud, Kara returned to the naval base for a memorial service. She was older now, moving slower, but her eyes were still sharp. The base had erected a statue, a helicopter in mid-flight, rotors frozen in metal, a pilot's helmet resting at its base. A plaque read, "In honor of those who fly into the storm." Kara stood before it, surrounded by pilots she'd trained, families she'd comforted, and strangers who knew her story. Jessica Carver was there, older but smiling, her daughter now grown and wearing her father's dog tag. They embraced. He'd be so proud of you, Jessica whispered. I'm proud of you, Kara replied. The ceremony began. A young pilot, barely 25, stood at the podium and told the story of Revenant, how she'd gone back, how she'd changed everything. Kara listened, feeling the weight of the years, the losses, the victories. When it ended, people approached her, thanked her, shook her hand. She smiled, accepted their gratitude, and thought about how strange it was that the worst night of her life had become her greatest contribution. As the sun set, she walked to the edge of the tarmac, staring up at the sky. A helicopter lifted off in the distance, rotors cutting the air, rising toward the clouds. She watched it disappear, and for a moment she was back in the cockpit, young, scared, determined, flying into the storm. Revenant, you ready? Hayes's voice in her memory, calm and steady. Always, she whispered to the empty sky. The wind carried her words away, and somewhere in the vast and silent blue she imagined Carver and Hayes flying beside her. Not ghosts, not regrets, just companions on a journey that never really ended. She turned and walked back toward the crowd, toward the light, toward the people who still needed her, because that's what revenants do. They come back. They endure. They carry the weight so others don't have to, and in the end, that's enough. That evening, Kara sat alone in her hotel room, the ceremony behind her. She opened her laptop and began to write, not a report, not a debrief, but a letter, to every pilot who would come after her, to everyone who would face the storm and have to decide whether to turn back or press on. To whoever reads this, you will be afraid, you will doubt yourself, you will carry ghosts you can't put down, but you will also save lives. You will be the reason someone makes it home. And on the days when that doesn't feel like enough, remember this: courage isn't the absence of fear, it's flying anyway. It's choosing to go back when everything in you screams to run. It's holding someone's hand in the dark and promising them they're not alone. That's what it means to be a pilot. That's what it means to serve. When your moment comes, and it will, don't hesitate, don't look back, just fly. And know that everyone who came before you is with you, lifting you up, believing in you. You are not alone, you never were. Semper Fi. CW5 Kara Maddie's Revenant. She saved the file, attached it to an email, and sent it to the training command with instructions to include it in every pilot's welcome packet. Then she closed the laptop, looked out the window at the stars, and smiled. The next morning she flew home. Not in a helicopter, those days were behind her. But as the plane lifted off and the ground fell away, she felt it again. That old familiar pull, the sky calling. She closed her eyes and let herself remember the storms, the fear, the impossible choices, and the moments, rare and precious, when everything went right. When the rotors beat steady, the instruments read true, and she brought everyone home. Those were the moments that mattered. Those were the moments she'd carry forever. When the plane landed, Kara walked out into the California sun, feeling the warmth on her face, the solid ground beneath her feet. She was home, and she was finally at peace. The dog tag still hung around her neck, it always would, but now it felt less like a burden and more like a promise, a reminder of who she'd been, who she'd become, and who she'd always be. Revenant, the one who came back, the one who never stopped trying. The one who proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to let go. She walked to her car, got in, and drove toward the ocean where the waves rolled endlessly and the sky stretched wide and infinite. And somewhere in that vast blue expanse, she imagined Carver's voice one last time. "Good job, Revenant. Now rest," she smiled. "Roger that, Lieutenant. See you on the other side." And with that, she let the past settle into memory, the pain soften into wisdom, and the fear transform into something stronger. Hope. For the pilots who would come after her, for the lives they would save, for the storms they would fly into again and again, because that's what heroes do. They don't give up. They don't turn back. They fly, always.